It'll be there somewhere. Aha, yes, fabulous. Okay, we are recording now. Okay, so yes, thank you, Sarah, for that reminder, even though I wrote it down in big letters. So we're doing the data collection session today as part of our kind of series of training on CDT practices. This is generally just a kind of best practice session. So we are trying to share with you our knowledge and what we've gleaned over our time as CDT managers. If you have any bright ideas or things that you do or have done as part of your CDT as well, we are really welcome to hear that information as well, because we want to share between us as we move forward. So without further ado, I'm just going to introduce you to the team we have today. So my name's Katie Welford. I am a manager of an EPSRC CDT on fusion power. That's the new one. We have an existing CDT on fusion energy as well. And we have the lovely Helen Knight from the University of Warwick, Sarah Marks from UCL School of Pharmacy, and Claudia Matz from the University of Nottingham. And of course, also the wonderful Isabella van Holstein, who I haven't got on my slide here, but she will be working our technical side today. So what will we cover today? Well, I'm going to get everyone to do a brief introduction in a minute for you, so you can get a little bit more information about us all. Then the wonderful Helen is going to give us a sort of brief scope on the day in the life of a CDT manager, to kind of give us a picture of the sort of things which we might be covering on a day-to-day basis, including data. We'll then be asking some questions about the likely sources of data that we have, how we manage them, recruitment data and tracking, and what's the best thing to do with that and how we've managed it. We're going to talk to you a little bit about some of the software that we are required to use, which includes JES in terms of recording studentships, and very importantly the UKRI annual monitoring form as well, which I'm sure we all have experience of, which is a fun one. Talking a little bit about how we collect student output and sort of general sources of data that we might find most useful on an operational level. We'll do our best to get through everything. There's quite a lot there to cover in the hour, so apologies if we don't get through everything. Feel free to ask any questions at any point, pop them in the chat or pop your hand up, and we can manage the questions as we go through. So hopefully everything is all right there. So I'm going to go back to this one, and I'm just going to ask, I'm going to start with Helen, then go to Sarah, and then Claudia to just introduce yourselves, please.
Thank you. So hello everybody, my name's Helen Knight. I'm a project manager for the MathRad programme, which is based at the University of Warwick. It's an EPSRC programme grant looking at mathematical theory of radiation transport. But prior to that, I was the manager of the HETSIS CDT, which is an EPSRC funded CDT at Warwick. And alongside that, I looked after the Diamond Science and Technology CDT as well.
Thank you, Helen. Sarah?
Hi, I am Sarah Marks. I am the Centre Manager currently for the TPT, which is Transformative Pharmaceutical Technologies, but also the upcoming one, which will start next October, which is the Accelerated Medicines Design and Development. And that's funded by EPSRC. The current one's funded by EPSRC and SFI in Ireland, as we have a connection with Ireland, but the new one coming through will just be EPSRC, which is in partnership with the University of Nottingham.
Thank you, Sarah. Claudia?
So I'm Claudia, and I'm a CDT manager here in Nottingham. I used to work together with Sarah when I was still in the School of Pharmacy, and we both together managed the CDTs in pharmacy. And I'm currently managing 2 energy CDTs at the Faculty of Engineering. One is nearly done, and the other one will be stopping in 2027.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Claudia. Right. So we're going to move on then to our day in the life. So I'm going to pass on over to Helen, who's just going to take us through this lovely slide that she's prepared here.
Thank you. So this is very much to set the scene of what a typical day might look like for a CDT manager, and hopefully it shows to you all that the type of skills that a manager is going to hold and the areas that they'll have knowledge in, and also demonstrates that at the same time as dealing with all of the day-to-day issues of running a CDT, you're going to be very much acting as an institutional memory for your centre as well. So pulling together reports on what happened, say, 5 years ago using data, but at the same time planning for events and activities for up to a year in advance. So you'll see from the list the types of different tasks that a manager will typically be involved with, and then the vast areas that their work covers as well. So we've got pastoral care and wellbeing at the start there, signposting students to the support that they need. Again, that's going to involve data collection and management when you're recording the issues that the student will be dealing with, curriculum management, quality assurance, evaluation, financial management, financial planning, control, budgeting, record keeping, a good working knowledge of the current UK funding landscape, excellent communication and listening and interpretation skills. They'll be needed. So in the when you're having the lunch with the students, taking their ideas for a public engagement activity and turning it into a reality, to an actual event. You need to be up to date with funder rules and regulations to assure compliance for your CDT, and of course be proficient with data handling, have good skills and knowledge, as most of those activities listed there involve some form of data handling, whether this be retention, data sharing, monitoring, all kinds of things. So you'll see that that underpins a lot of the activities that you'll typically do day to day as a CDT manager.
Perfect. Thank you, Helen. That's great. So that leads us nicely on into our questions about data, which we're going to address now. So we're going to start off with just kind of generally what the likely sources of data we might come across, how we manage them, and covering things like sort of how we handle our data, how we store it, how we think about deleting data. There may be some overlap with some of these questions, by the way, because it's quite a broad topic, but we will start there. I'm going to start with Sarah, then Claudia, and then Helen.
Okay, so likely sources of data and how to manage them. First off, the first data would be your recruitment data. So the way that we handle it in our centre is that we have an online application form that we use MS Forms for, and in that it kind of includes a CV, so it's got all the educational work that the applicant has, their history, but we also include our ED&I sort of equal opportunities monitoring stuff in there, so we capture it for all of the recruitments, which obviously we can then bring forward when we then create JES records for the recruiter students. That is only really accessible by the CDT managers. We tend to handle all the data, and especially the protected characteristics. It's generally only the centre managers that have access to it, because obviously the smaller amount of people that you have access to it, the less likely there'll be a leak. But it is all saved within Microsoft 360, which all universities support because of all the data encryption, privacy. So it is mostly the centre managers that review, handle, store. Currently, we don't delete much data because we have to report back on an annual basis, but as has happened in recent years, the annual report didn't come out annually. I'm sure you all had that recently. For us having 2 centres, we had 4 different forms to fill in, so you couldn't really delete. However, we do delete the forms themselves, and we just keep the data. We separate that out and anonymise it, which, I mean, we do anonymise shortlisting anyway, but to keep the ED&I data from reporting back to our advisory board on an annual basis, plus EPSRC. So the likely sources, again, was the application data. the data on the students recruited, and there'll also be their recruitment activities, the student activities, which EPSRC have their own platform called ResearchFish, but that is only for students to fill in, I think, for like their third year, that they monitor their research output and the impacts. But for us as a centre, we like to keep abreast of that, and we have our quarterly management group meeting. So we report back what the students are doing. We report back annually to the advisory boards. Again, we use MS Forms for that. So we have several different ones, you know, for conferences, for outreach, for posters, and we have a landing page where they can select the different one. And actually, that all goes into a database, which Claudia was very instrumental in creating. That was something new for this centre. We've had centres before, but we didn't collect the data in that way. It was a bit ad hoc. It was quite difficult. It's quite laborious, labour intensive for Claudia and I to be checking LinkedIn, emailing the students. So we created the database, which is a mixture of lists on SharePoint, but then you have the forms which the students fill in, and there's like a connecting flow that drags it into the lists, which can be temperamental. But I think on the whole, it has been very, very helpful, and a lot easier, because of course you can then pull the data as Excel spreadsheets, which you then use to populate if you're reporting back annually to whoever. And most of we don't delete because it's not necessarily personal. It's only really the recruitment data that's personal. In terms of maybe like the research that the students themselves create, we ask them to set up a team, that Microsoft team, for their individual project, which obviously their supervisors are on and they are on. But I, as a centre manager, as an owner, so once they leave the university, we can still access any of the information. I don't really do anything with it, but it's if we need access to it. So I haven't really done much with any of that. But I think that's it for now.
Great, cool. Thank you, Sarah. That's a lot of information. I think we're going to get that quite a lot, because data is big, which is absolutely fine. So we're going to go to Claudia now and see what how Claudia has to deal with some data.
So we are doing the recruitment individually at each partner university, and the partners weren't interested in having something similar like Sarah was just discussing, a form. So it is sometimes difficult to get the data of the applicants and who was invited to interview, what the things you need to report to the CDT. So I need to remind all partners to collect the data and then to send to me via Teams. So in a restricted channel, so the data doesn't come out and I compile it. So this is less robust. We don't collect, the universities don't necessarily collect all the data that EPSRC needs. So when you do annual reports, we can just say data not collected. So that's something you need to be aware of, that this can be a disadvantage, but it can have advantage as well, because it's more flexible towards a certain university. That's for you to decide how you want to handle recruitment. But if I would give a personal recommendation, I would say do it like Sarah CDT does, instead of having individual CDTs. In terms of student impact data, I think the forms and lists are really good, but the compliance of the students isn't necessarily so good in inputting the data. So what we have found is, meeting the students online for 10 minutes, maybe every 4 or 5 months, and saying like, look, this is the data we've got from you. I'm sure you've done other things and they're brilliant. And then the students put this in. Other CDTs get around it because they really keep hold of the travel money, and students need to apply and send data beforehand to get the travel money. We don't do this. So, and I agree with Sarah that the data I have, I do not delete, but everything is saved on Teams and only certain people have access to this data.
Okay, great. Thank you, Claudia. Before I move on to Helen, there's just a couple of questions, I think probably for Sarah. So Sarah, someone's just asked, Stefania's asked, could you please repeat the different topics you use MF for?
Yeah, I'm just responding in MS chat. Just takes me a little while.
That's fine. So just whilst I'm looking at these questions, I'd be interested to learn more about what Teams was being used for. So that's Sarah's, I think. Do you have students fill out a Microsoft form before an official application, or both at the same time? Does anyone take data from the official application system? Could you just comment on that, Sarah?
Yeah, so we do our own recruitment because UCL selects, and I think also Nottingham's own, like Claudia was saying, it doesn't collect all the information and you can't anonymize anything, and actually getting hold of the application forms is really difficult because we don't have our own program code. I think going into the new CDTs we have to, so it should be a bit easier. So we get them to fill in our application form first, and once we've made an offer, we ask them they have to go through the official system. But it should be, they just cut and paste from their application. And we don't really use the official system, get any information there, because it doesn't really give us, as far as I'm aware, it doesn't give us anything extra. So we just use all the information for our own application form. I think that answered everything.
Yep, perfect. Thank you, Sarah. Hopefully that's all right, Amanda, for you there. And Chris has said, very impressed with your use of forms. Well done, Sarah.
Oh, thank you, Claudia. She was very
Claudia.
instrumental in that.
So Helen, what is your sort of start off in terms of your sources of data at your CDT?
So with HETSYS, we use the Warwick's official application forms for all applicants to the centre. So we'd have all the information on our website, but we'd send people directly to the forms. We did have our own course code, so we were able to do that, and then they'd apply officially through there, and then we'd take over. It sounds really basic what we used to do, but it was very much just a point of, like, our student records and admission systems, like we've mentioned, there wasn't a lot of flexibility in it as such, because the questions were rigid, and some of them and we weren't able to pull off some of the demographic data that we needed for our steering committee and our advisory board, and also for the monitoring survey for EPSRC. So and they're all in different screens as well. It wasn't the best system really. So I had just a great big, like, Bible spreadsheet with absolutely everything on up on my OneDrive that the directors also had access to. And I'd use that to monitor applications. So when I get the official notification that an application had been received, I'd just transfer all the data over into my spreadsheet, which was a bit of a pain at the time, especially when things were quite busy, when you were getting multiple applications in. But really, it saved an awful lot of drama and headaches further down the line, when you would have to be doing your annual monitoring survey plus one from the previous year because of the delays and things like that. So I'd use that spreadsheet for loads of different aspects of the recruitment process. So I'd use it for monitoring application numbers, tracking offers and conversions. I put some VLOOKUPs and all kinds of things in there, so I could get all the data off really quickly when I was asked. And also and then I created a JES tab in there as well, so it would pull the data that I needed to eventually put into JES when JES opened up, when we'd got the students here and they were enrolled. So it was like a bit of a one-stop shop really. Like I said, it was quite a lot of work at the time when you were dead busy in the middle of recruitment cycle, but it paid dividends in the end because it just all worked together and made life a little bit easier going forward. Other data that I used to manage in HETSYS, so as well as application and recruitment data, we had an integrated PG diploma as part of our training provision. So there was marks management and exam boards and things like that with managing that taught course. So basically, it was a PGT course at the end of the day. And then with that came mitigating circumstances and things that we'd have on offer for the students if they were struggling during that part of their course. So there'd be that kind of data that we'd be collecting as well. We'd also, we mentioned about RTSG earlier on, but obviously all the financial data that we'd be processing through. So I'd have access to everything. I'd be monitoring everything, right from student spending against their own travel budgets to tracking salaries that were going out against the CDT budget for the various members of academic staff that we had on our books almost. You know, I remember once there was an issue with salary pulling off for somebody else who actually wasn't involved in the CDT at the time, and having to grab all of that salary data and do salary journals and things like that. So that kind of thing would be involved in as well. So quite sensitive information based on salaries and things. And then also there's all the other nitty-gritty stuff. It's very much, I think, there's lots of different like plates spinning all at the same time when you're managing a CDT, right from, like I said, application data, salary data, to even like little things that are important, like equipment inventories as well. So in our CDT, all of our students receive laptops that weren't funded by the CDT, they were funded by their supervisors department. So we'd have all these different cost codes and all these different bits and pieces, and every other department had different ways of mapping where their equipment was that they'd paid for. So we had to keep an up-to-date inventory of all of that kind of stuff. So, you know, again, it doesn't seem as important as application data, but it was still important for the running of the centre. So I've made a note here that it's like you have to keep all these plates spinning and these wheels within wheels moving when it comes to this sort of thing. And it's a huge task to maintain it, as well as doing the day-to-day running of your centre and dealing with a day like what we the slide that we put up at the beginning of the presentation. And really, it's not a task that you can do all by yourself, because it would just take up all of your time. So I think you really need to get people on board to help you, like a little bit like what my colleagues mentioned earlier on, getting them to fill out forms when they want to go, students when they want to go travelling. So what we used to do, and to track the outputs of our students for impact, if they wanted to go somewhere to a conference or whatever, they'd as well as getting their supervisor's permission, they'd have to check in with myself and also the co-directors of the centre. So just an email to say, can I go to conference X to present Y? And then I'd be able to grab what they were doing before they went, rather than run around afterwards trying to figure it out based on like LinkedIn or other information. And then if I needed to plug any gaps, I could. That doesn't really seem like rocket science, but it worked really, really well. And we trained them right from the beginning, like, this is what you do. If you want to travel, this is what you do. And I mean, obviously sometimes they fall through the cracks and somebody would go off somewhere and they hadn't asked permission before. And I was also super lucky that I had co-directors who didn't mind rolling their sleeves up and being involved in like the day-to-day business like this, and getting an email asking for permission for student whoever to go off to a conference in wherever. So I was super lucky there that I had very compliant directors who used to go along with me a little bit. But yeah, so basically getting people on board. I've made another note as well about marks management if you have a talk course. So again, starting off strong at the beginning of the course and making sure that the different module leaders submit their marks for their courses through the proper channels in your institution. So we used Moodle at Warwick, and you can record marks through Moodle. And sometimes they'd bypass Moodle and just send me an email with a bunch of marks in against student names, and I'd have to be really tough and send it back and say, can you put this into Moodle? Can you do it properly? Because I can't accept it like this. Or why can't you accept it? Because I have to be tough with them, because if they went through Moodle, the marks have been sent in a GDPR compliant way. Also, it was in the right format for inputting them then into Tabular, which would then go into the exam grids, and so on and so on and so on. So it was hard to be tough at first, because I'm a bit of a softie anyway, but it paid off in the end. And putting in procedures and rules might be met first with a few tuts and sighs, but I think it does really pay off if you persevere with it. It makes your life easier going forward. So I think saying about it's not a task you can do by yourself to manage all the data for your CDT. You know, you've got to get your colleagues on board in subtle ways. So
great. Yeah, I think that's a really good point there, Helen. As a manager, it's not about doing everything yourself. Data in particular is just one area that is massive. So it's about having that overview and bringing in people to kind of support within your team as well. Claudia.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something about what Helen said about finances. So we ran a lot of training events during the year, and because we are a 3-partner university center, we have the students traveling a lot. So what I do is I note down how much each training unit costs. I mean, some are online, they don't cost as such, but for example, our spring school, when everybody comes together once a year, all the students for 3-4 days, and we have activities and outside speakers, I do collect how much that cost and how much expenses the students put in, and that helps me to see, you know, are we staying on track, and also, you know, kind of planning how much money do we need the next year to do these training elements, and they are always a lot more expensive than you originally budgeted for, which can be an issue. So I think if you continually do this, it's quite easy to pull the data at the end of the year for your training budget.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Claudia. I think it's important to remember as well with CDTs, they can vary so much. So we're dealing with different sizes of grant, we're dealing with different size of resource, we're dealing with different number of multi-institutional groups. So how you might work at your own institution, your own university may look quite different to how someone else works, which is why we've got kind of a varying group of people to talk to here. A lot of my colleagues here have just mentioned using MS and MF Forms and things like that. My university actually is a Google university, so we have to do everything via Google Drive and Google Docs. We also use Zoom rather than Teams, things like that as well. It's really important that you talk to your university and your university's data protection teams as well about how their data is protected, and you gather statements from them in terms of policy statements when you're collecting data. So we often have to do this when we do a form, and the university will say, please say this, make sure that you're covered within that respect. As a Google university, if we're gathering data, we have to make sure we've created a spreadsheet here so that we are covered in terms of the GDPR. And this links into also, because we're we're multi-institutional on a 6 university level, within our collaboration agreement, some of you may have come across this, some of you may not, you must make sure you have a data sharing agreement within that collaboration agreement that covers you to be able to gather that data and hold it within the main institution that's running the grant. Sarah, please.
I was just going to add about the GDPR and privacy. I remember when this GDPR sort of first came in, and me and Claudia trying to work out how does that relate to us. And I remember the nightmare of trying to get in a joint privacy policy, because we had a website that was supposed to be look like one centre, because obviously the centre itself is not a physical thing. But we wanted to show to the outside world we were a centre, not 2 separate institutions. And so it was really difficult, and we never ever got to the point where we could have a joint privacy policy, and we had to list the individual ones. And more annoyingly, because the website was actually hosted by Nottingham, they just put up theirs privacy policy and all the links. So you were taking out the CDT website and into Nottingham website, which was a bit frustrating. But for anyone who has more than one institute, I think that's going to be a problem. They understand that maybe you need a separate, like a website, a joint website. But weirdly enough, EPSRC don't understand that each time you set up a CDT, that website cost should be part of it. Maybe because not all centres have been so long running as us. I think we're about in our 4th or 5th one. So of course, when they first started like 15 years ago, you're not going to have that same website the whole time. But my main point was that it is quite difficult to get joint sort of privacy policies and things. But we also have a collaboration agreement, which all partners, our industry partners and the universities, and we have like in terms of sharing stuff, an open innovation policy, because especially with the industry, they can be quite cagey about what they share. But the whole idea is that if we're having a conference with us lot, you can talk about these sort of more sensitive stuff and that we can share this information.
Yeah, perfect. No, that's really good. Thank you. And I think it's this point about the shared, not being able to do a shared statement is really true. We have the same. We have a website that is CDT. We were very clearly informed by our university when we looked into this further. The CDT is not considered a legal entity. The legal entities are the individual institutions. So you have to be really careful about where you kind of sit within the legality of each institution, who the host institution is, working with your collaborative partners as well within that. In terms of data sharing as well on the collaboration agreement, I just wanted to say, if you are doing talk programs across a multi-institutional level, it's worth looking about disability sharing data as well. I often find that we need to share with talk staff at each of the institutions and say, you know, this student needs these things, these measures put in place so that we can support them. This student needs these. Making sure that's part of your collaboration agreement kind of helps as you do that moving forward. A shortcut to that is you can say to the student directly, please email me and say you give me permission to share this information with each of the institutions where you'll be studying. We also make sure that all of our students, regardless of university, register at York as a shadow student or a visiting student, so that we have all their data held officially by the university. And that helps a lot with some of the shortcutting in terms of the data, because we can't hold the data ourselves, but it means we can then go to the central team at the university and say, please gather this information. Which is really helpful. We have covered quite a lot there within what we've just said. I just want to hone in on the kind of annual monitoring form, because this is quite a big thing, and people have touched on that.
Before you move on, Linda Elvin had a question. Can we just cover that and then we move on to that?
I have missed that, I think, in my lollygagging. Where is Linda's question?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Perfect. Thank you, Linda.
And you had just very briefly touched on it there in terms of students with additional disability type needs. As the lead organisation, how do you go about collecting that? Do you ask the students to share it with you if they want to, and to have it considered in the training? You know, obviously as the host, we are developing training, and it's finding a way of getting that information, because obviously they aren't registered with us. And how do you go about dealing with that?
Yeah, so from our perspective, we for the most part, we ask the students to share that information with us directly. We have an induction week where we say, please approach me privately or send an email to this address with a statement that says what you require, and we will pass, and that you give us permission to pass that on. I am working on trying to get this information directly from universities that have student support plans and things like that. That can be tricky because universities don't obviously like sharing that information very widely. So the shortcut is asking the student directly. I don't know if Sarah, Claudia or Helen, either of you want to comment on this? Well, how you might do this? Claudia?
So when we have our induction, I actually, talk to the students, and we've also had students with disability who talked to our students quite openly, and said how good it is actually to declare your disability and to let people know and get a support plan in place. So we are not a big CDT. Our students feel quite safe and have declared disabilities or asked for help or came in later to get help to declare to get adjustments, and that seems to work really well. We are always very clear what we do with the data, like using data for JES or, you know, for our own statistics, that the students know what we're doing with it, but obviously they have the right to withdraw this as well. But we are quite open, and we have disabled staff as well, and they are quite open, so that creates an atmosphere of inclusion from the start.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Claudia. That's a really good idea. Sarah or Helen, any more comments on that one?
No, I haven't got anything else to say.
That's fine.
We don't do we don't, even though we have modules, we don't have taught, and it's not, we've had a number of, say, students use the DSA and the disability student allowance, which I have a feeling that not many students realise, that they think maybe it's an undergrad thing. Because of course when you apply to a degree they always ask about that, right? But it's very different, and it's actually made me think maybe we should adjust our online application form to say, would you like to apply? Because obviously EPSRC have an allowance for that, and I don't know about other CDTs, but we definitely don't make applicants more aware that actually they're entitled to annual leave, to sick leave, to maternity leave, to parental leave, all of this. And we can help. I mean, I don't think we can do part-time courses, part-time PhDs, but I definitely think things like that should be more aware. And and it makes me think about what I can I take it all on my shoulder, right? I think a lot of our centre managers do, but what we can do as a centre to make more aware that we're here to support everybody regardless of what their needs are. Though I think newer generations are a lot better at asking for support.
Yeah, no, definitely. Helen?
Yeah, I agree. I think thinking about back to HETSIS, I'd let students know when they enrolled what the options were for them about maternity leave, sick leave, paternity leave, etc., etc. But perhaps if I had maybe done something at application stage and gathered some data then, it would have made things a little more transparent for the students on what they could potentially expect to, you know, what they could potentially receive, but also it might have made my life a little bit easier as well in the long run. So use that time in the student cycle to kind of glean as much as you can. I was really lucky in HETSIS because it was only a single institution. And when I took over looking after Diamond, it was very much in like the dwindling stages of it. I only had a handful of students left to finish. There weren't any involved in a taught course, so I'm not entirely sure how they would, because all of the Diamond students would register at Warwick and then they would go off, they'd have their master's year with us and then they would go off and register as PhD students at other institutions. But it was particularly difficult to track data and things for them for JES, but we'll get to that if we're going to talk about JES and monitoring in a second. But yeah, using that window of opportunity at application stage would be great.
Yeah, great, thank you. Claudia, very quickly, and then we'll just have a quick chat about JES and monitoring before we have some more questions at the end.
So this is not directly data collection, but I'm part of a neurodiversity network, and all the training elements we now organize have neurodiversity and disability generally, as part of how we organize things. So having more breaks, having quiet rooms, having fidget toys, and actually that benefits everybody. Like less is more sometimes, and even though that is not data collection at the moment, I think that has really made a difference for everybody. It's just disability friendly.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Claudia. That's really useful. Okay, so we've done a lot of the general chat. We've covered kind of all of the points there. So we're just going to talk briefly about JES and annual monitoring. Some of Sarah, Claudia and Helen have touched on this a little bit already. The annual monitoring form comes annually, usually. It can be quite a big piece of work because it is a lot of data. I would say I met some lovely people from EPSRC recently at the PI event, and they weren't aware that some of us have to go to individual universities to collect that data because we're not a legal entity, we're not a data holder. So now I think when we had the most recent one and people responded saying there's not enough time to fill this in, they were very generous in putting a very long, then, you know, a much longer deadline on there, which was really, really helpful, because when you're dealing with multi-institutions and you're having to get that information from everyone, it can take a long time, as I'm sure some of you are aware. So I'm just going to go quickly to Sarah and then Claudia and then Helen, and just say, what are your top tips for dealing with JES and the annual monitoring form?
So we started using moving all the questions from the form into an Excel spreadsheet. So then you have tabs for each one. I'm afraid to say it's mostly the centre managers who do the majority of the work. I understand that, like, the data, like say the applicant data, we would do that. But even trying to get like the case studies and all of that, the centre managers end up suggesting all of that. But the easiest way we've found is using an Excel spreadsheet, so you can mess around with the data, you can share it, you can collaborate together, and then we just have to have many meetings with the directors say, so what are you going to do? And then go, oh, well, we'll assign it, you know. But you know what academics are like. They'll do like the night before or something, which is very unhelpful if you need to input stuff. But we do try to assign certain bits to certain academics. So like obviously the training stuff will go to the training director. But this is kind of why our having the database kind of informs a lot of it as well, because we can draw that information in, and as centre managers we can suggest some case studies. And obviously, as whoever's the lead institution will kind of need to take the lead on organising that. But generally, and like at the moment, the current centre, we have 3 CDT managers. So we do it as a collaborative effort to try and get as much filled in as possible, identify amongst us how to do it, and then kind of badger the academics to fill in their bits.
Perfect. Great. Thank you, Sarah. That's a good start. Claudia, anything to add there?
Yeah, so basically I have a questionnaire with all the questions we need for JES, and I send that to the students and explain why we are collecting the data, and then I put it into JES. I'm the only CDT managers for the 2 CDTs I'm managing, but we have two assistants who can help. I have the also a spreadsheet like Sarah has for all the recruitment data, and what I find helpful is I collect impact during the year, and I just write it down what has come up, and then just in regular intervals just add to it. And if something was specifically successful, I make a note, and then I discuss the annual form with the director and fill it in, and then have other people commenting. I have to say we have a wonderful finance department who help with the finance data, and it really makes sense if you know people in your institutions and the other institutions from professional services. They're so helpful and you can work together.
Great, that's really useful. Yeah, use the people around you. It's really important. Helen.
Yeah, same as what my colleagues have said there. So I put everything into an Excel spreadsheet, so it was easier than using the SurveyMonkey form. And same as what Sarah said, it would my directors would be involved, but it would be up to me as the centre manager to really kick everything off and write a lot of the case study work and a lot of the outreach stuff, as well as plugging in the numbers and things like that. We had a lot of industry partnerships in HETSIS, so that side of the financial data I'd have to pull together. But like what Claudia said, it's the same in our institution. We've got a fantastic student finance team within our doctoral college who would generate all the other data for us. So And so again, to echo that, really use the people around you. I think again, like I mentioned, HETSIS was a single institution CDT, so it was super easy. Really, they wouldn't have to worry about tapping up other people to get data from them. But so Diamond was wrapping up, and I had to do an interim expenditure statement just before I left, which was really, so I didn't really because it was in such, the final expenditure statement, not interim, because it was closing down basically when I took the role on. A lot of things had already been put up in place, and it was very much just wrapping up. So trying to build a relationship, find people in the partner institutions. There were 9 institutions. Find the right person within not only the institution but in the schools, because it was a multidisciplinary CDT. Get to know them to enable me to get the data and everything that I needed for the FES. Even though I was working with our doctoral college colleagues, was really, really, really hard. So and I think if I could have my time over, and if I'd started Diamond, if I'd have been with Diamond from the start, I think I would have worked hard to build those connections and bridges with the partner institutions, maybe even gone to see them face to face, so you've got, you know who's behind the emails and stuff like that, so it makes it easier when you're asking them for data. There was a lot of mixed messages as well with Diamond, where with regard to GES, so some institutions would say it's Warwick's job as the lead institution to look after all the GES records for the millions of students, but then Warwick would say, no, actually it's up to them. The students registered with them, their PhD is with them, they handle the GES records. So there was some holes within GES for the Diamond students. It was really, really, really messy. And like I said, if I'd have been in the manager position from the beginning, then I would think I would put in some better strategies there.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. Getting sort of clarification on who does what at the beginning is a really strong point to make.
And sticking to that.
Yes, yeah, if you can. So we've got about 10 minutes left. I'm going to open for questions, but before I do that, I'm just going to pop up this slide. So this is a QR code. If we can ask you to open that now, or follow it now, so that you have it saved somewhere, just to give us some feedback. One thing we'd really like to know is this a useful form of training for you? Are there any other topics that you think would be useful that you'd like us to cover? That would be really helpful. You can also put these in the chat as well. I think we can capture the chat at the end, can't we, Isabella? Save the chat. And any additional questions that you'd like to ask that we don't get to today, so that we can follow up on those, that would be really handy, because we're trying to build our kind of training provision, and we want to provide something that's useful for everyone, that answers the questions that you need to know as well. So yes, please do that. So let's have some questions now whilst I leave that there for you to look at. So I've got one from Emma on the chat. Any of you use MS Access as a database that feeds from Excel and manual records? Is that a good idea to set up, or do you think it's too much work to set up the benefits of having a database? I used to use them for something else, and I really like the different dashboards and reporting system, but the setup is very time consuming. Who would like to comment on this one? Does anyone do this?
Can I put in a comment there?
Yeah, please do.
So when I took over Diamond, the previous administrator had an access database for everything, and I joined Diamond in COVID, so I was working remotely, never used Access before. And I'm probably now a bit too long in the tooth to learn a whole new program. I think if I'd been proficient in Access, it would have been great, but really basically what I had to do was grab what I could from it and basically start again, which probably wasn't the most efficient use of my time, but because of the way that we were working then, it was so strange, like, onboarding into a new job from my spare room, not being able to sit with the director like next to each other because he knew how the database worked. I'm sure it would have been absolutely fab, but personally from my point of view, it was a bit crazy and a bit scary and not very useful. So I think it depends on if Access is something that your institution uses on the regular, and lots of people lots of people need it and lots of people use it, and they're very proficient in it, then great. But I'll just be mindful that not everybody uses it these days.
Is that helpful, Emma? Yeah, fab, lovely. Isabella, someone has just asked if there's, there we go, perfect. So on the ball, I love it. Sarah King. Oh, there's Sarah. Hi, Sarah. Sarah is, I hope you don't mind me putting you on the spot, from EPSRC, but it does say that in your title, so that's fine. Interesting comments on DSA and T&C for the students. Do your CDTs have introductory meetings for each cohort and share this information and signpost them to it? Lots of nods here. I'm going to come to Claudia. Can you comment on this one?
Yes, we always have an introduction to the CDT, and you know, we signpost students to obviously supporting services, to the data we collect, and but I know that the introduction at the beginning can be quite overwhelming, because I only ever hear like 20% of what's said or retain the information. So we need to bring the information up again, for example, during our residential school, or reach out to the students so that they have everything. And we also always make sure when we have an introduction that older cohort, and so the students who started in previous years, come along for you know, coffee or lunch. So because it's sometimes nicer to speak to students and ask them lots of questions.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you. I think, Helen, you were nodding as well. Do you have any comments on that one?
We used to have a week-long induction period for our students, and when I first joined, it was very much focused on the academic side of things, like their training and stuff like that, and there wasn't really an administrative session as such, and where we could talk about all of these things. So we put that in. I don't know, there's a lot for them to take in that first week, so I try and stagger a few bits and pieces. So we talk about different things at different times within that first term. So it'd leave things like expenses and how to claim travel and things like that until a bit further down, when they'd be more likely to be doing that, and try and stagger things a little bit, so that they're able to take on the important stuff that you were telling them, piece by piece, like chunk it up a little bit so it wasn't too much all at once. So
yeah, no, I think that's brilliant idea, Helen. I don't know about anyone else. There's some questions about handbook. Do people have student handbooks? We have a student handbook. I do find a lot of the time the students do not read the student handbook, and you spend a lot of time writing the student handbook for it not to be read. Now, one of the things I'm looking at doing is we're redeveloping our website at the moment. So I have decided, because we are multi-institutional, yes, thank you, Nancy, tell me about it, correct. Because we're multi-institutional, I have asked to have a student login on our website to make it easier to access, and then through that student login, they will have sort of compartmentalized pages for each section, which means it makes everything a little bit more manageable, chunkable, that kind of thing. Hopefully then it's easier for them to absorb, or if they think, oh, I have a question about X, you know, the conferences that I need to go to, or how to book my travel, they can just find the page on the website rather than having to, goodness me, trawl through an entire document to find what they're looking for. Yeah. Very hard work. So yeah, something like that might be worth thinking about if you have the capacity to do that, but certainly most of us, I think, deal with student handbooks at the moment. Sarah?
I put in there a comment that I'm trying to create a student wellbeing booklet. So I think that might, because we also spend huge amounts of time on a booklet, hardly anyone reads it. And I agree that in the first couple of weeks, everything's really overwhelming. So when it comes to supporting your well-being, that's not really what you're listening to. You're listening to, where do I get my card? Where's my office? Where's, you know, all the very practical stuff. And so you don't really think about that. And I've been thinking a lot about how best to support our PhDs and their well-being. And so I'm trying to create a booklet. It's going to take me quite a long time, because I want to get it as user, you know, more like to be used than not. But it's kind of like two sections where it's how to be proactive and support yourself when you're well, and what you can access, but then a second one about when things go wrong. So it'd be very basic. It'll be flow charts. This is happening. What do I do? Who do I speak to? Where's all the links? But having spoken to the graduate tutor here at the SOP, she's like, well, that'd be really good for the supervisors and staff as well, because I'm sure you're like UCL, you go on and you have all this great information, but you're there half an hour on the computer trying to find it all. And I know people have tried, like our doctoral school have redone their website and it looks very good, but again, it still can be quite overwhelming. But also it could be a resource that when you go to see your supervisor or a graduate tutor, it's something that they can use and go through it with you. Because some of the information I put in this, like I've shown one of the students and they're like, yeah, I've never heard of that. I've heard of that, but I've never heard of that. I didn't realise you can do that.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea, definitely.
So I wonder if we can put more effort into those than handbooks. Or the handbooks could be something put on the website that applicants look at rather than current students. Like you say, they just don't use them.
Yeah, and for supervisors as well, that's something I've been thinking of for several years, but I've never had time to kind of put the time into some information for supervisors. It's worth remembering as well, we're working at a multi-institutional level, so students will be absorbing individual institutional handbooks, individual institutional guidance, and then there's all the different stuff that kind of works within the CDT as well. So we've got 1 minute left. I'm just going to finish with Helen, who's got a hand up, who might be able to comment on something. Really nice to see that lots of people have put some comments in about the way they do things in the chat, so thank you so much for that. That's brilliant. Helen?
I just wanted to draw the attention to Jennifer's point here about specific reminders at key points in the studentship, especially in the run up to the funding end date. I think a lot of us focus on when students are inducted, what you need to do, this is what you do here, this is what you do here. But actually, thinking about PhD journey, the most stressful point is in that last year when they're running up to their submission. And there's so much pressure on them to present at conferences, to get their theses written up, this, that, the other. When will, and you know, simple. I remember one question I had. So a student, it's after I left Texas, he submitted his PhD. He was really, really excited, but nobody had told him that once that thesis goes in, your funding finishes. Even though he strictly had 2 months left, that's it, it's gone. So that's super important that we remember the latter stages of the student journey, as well as that first bit where they're all fresh and young and new and green. When they're coming to the end, that's equally, if not more so, important to them.
Yeah, no, definitely. Thank you, Helen. Yeah, so I think we've come to the end now. Please do fill in that feedback back. Please do tell us what training you would like. We are more than willing to look at the different topics that would be helpful for you. Have a think about, if you're not already, join the PRISM network, go onto the PRISM website. We're all volunteers, but we're running quite a lot of stuff between us. It would be lovely to have more people join us as well. I can see Isabella nodding. She agrees. Yes. So
especially if we want to do more CDT stuff. If you have a wild hair to take on managing the continued organisation of this, do join the PRISM network and we'll let you.
Yeah, absolutely. Perfect. So thank you very much, everyone. Hopefully that's been helpful for you, and yeah, hopefully we can do another one of these soon in the not so distant future.